I'm Maya, 20F, and I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of expectations and disappointment. My family situation has become unbearable, and I don't know how to escape it. I'm the middle child of 3 siblings. I have an older brother, Reggie, 24M, and a younger sister, Katie, 16F. Growing up in our suburban home, I always felt like the odd one out in my family. My parents, especially my mom, seemed to have this perfect vision of what their children should be like. My dad, a successful lawyer, and my mom, a former beauty queen turned real estate agent, had high expectations for all of us. But somehow, those expectations never seemed to align with who I was. Reggie was the golden child, smart, athletic, and charismatic. He excelled in school, was the star of the football team, and could charm anyone he met. I remember when he was 10, he won the school spelling bee, and our parents threw this massive party. They invited the whole neighborhood, hired a magician, and even got a custom cake made. It was like a mini carnival in our backyard. I was 6 at the time, and I remember feeling so proud of my big brother, but also a little sad that I'd never seen my parents that happy before. Katie, being the baby of the family, was doted on and treated like a princess from the day she was born. I was 4 when she came along, and suddenly, it felt like all the attention shifted. My mom would spend hours dressing her up in frilly outfits, taking pictures and showing her off to anyone who would look. As Katie grew older, she became this perfect little mini-me of our mom, bubbly, outgoing, and effortlessly pretty. And then there was me, stuck in the middle, never quite living up to anyone's expectations. I was the quiet one, more interested in books and art than sports or socializing. I tried to fit in, I really did. When I was 7, I begged my parents to let me join the local soccer team because Reggie was so good at sports. They agreed, probably hoping this would be my chance to shine. But I was terrible at it. I couldn't kick the ball straight, I was always the last one picked for teams, and I'd come home covered in mud and bruises. After a few months, my mom told me it was okay to quit, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. I first noticed the real difference in treatment when I was around 8 years old. It was my birthday, and I had been begging for a bike for months. I'd even made a scrapbook of different bike models, circling my favorites and leaving it conspicuously around the house. When the day finally came, I was so excited to open my presents. But instead of a bike, I got a set of encyclopedias. My mom said it would help me improve my grades, which had been slipping. I'd gotten a B in math. Meanwhile, Reggie got a new gaming console for his birthday that year, and Katie got a pony ride party for hers. As I grew older, the disparities became more apparent. My parents attended every single one of Reggie's football games but rarely showed up for my choir performances. I remember my first solo in the school musical when I was 12. I was so nervous, but also excited. I'd practiced for weeks, and I really thought I'd nailed it. But when I looked out into the audience, my parents' seats were empty. They showed up just as the curtain was closing, full of apologies about traffic and Katie's dance recital running late. I pretended it was okay, but inside, I was crushed. They threw elaborate parties for Katie's achievements but forgot to congratulate me when I won the school art competition. When I was 14, my art teacher entered one of my paintings in a county-wide contest. To my surprise, I won first place. The local newspaper even did a small write-up about it. I was over the moon and couldn't wait to show my parents. But when I got home, waving the newspaper, my mom was busy helping Katie prepare for her beauty pageant, and my dad was on an important call. They glanced at the article, said "That's nice, honey," and went back to what they were doing. It was like I was invisible in my own home. One incident that really stands out happened when I was 15. Our family was on a camping trip, something Reggie had been pushing for because he wanted to show off his Boy Scout skills. I was actually excited about it, thinking maybe this would be a chance for us all to bond. On the second day, we decided to go hiking. Reggie was leading the way, showing off his orienteering skills, while Katie complained about being tired and got piggyback rides from our dad. I was struggling to keep up, my asthma acting up in the high altitude. I'd had asthma since I was little, but my parents often forgot about it, as if ignoring it would make it go away. When I asked if we could slow down, my mom snapped at me, saying I should have stayed at the campsite if I couldn't handle it. I tried to explain that I was having trouble breathing, but she just rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic. A few minutes later, I ended up having a full-blown asthma attack. I couldn't breathe, I was wheezing and gasping for air. Reggie was the one who finally noticed and ran back to help me use my inhaler. And instead of concern from my parents, all I got were annoyed looks and comments about how I ruined the hike for everyone. The favoritism affected every aspect of my life. When it came to college applications, my parents spared no expense for Reggie's Ivy League aspirations. They hired tutors, paid for expensive SAT prep courses, and even took him on college tours across the country. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by brochures from all these prestigious universities, listening to my parents and Reggie discuss application strategies and essay topics. When I tried to join the conversation, asking about where I might apply, my dad offhandedly said, "Oh, we'll figure something out for you later." That something turned out to be a community college brochure they handed me a few months later, saying it was more realistic given my grades. I was devastated. It's not that I had my heart set on an Ivy League school, but I had hoped they'd at least consider other options for me. I'd worked hard to bring my grades up, thinking maybe that would finally make them proud. But it seemed like nothing I did was ever good enough. I tried so hard to gain their approval. I joined every club I could think of, debate team, environmental club, even the math league, even though numbers were never my strong suit. I took advanced classes, pushing myself to the point of exhaustion. I even started volunteering at the local animal shelter, thinking maybe if I showed initiative and compassion, they'd see my worth. But nothing seemed to be good enough. If I got an A, they'd ask why it wasn't an A+. If I won second place in a competition, they'd wonder why I couldn't be first like Reggie always was. Once, after a particularly grueling debate competition where I placed third, my mom's first words were, "Well, I guess public speaking isn't your thing. Maybe you should focus on something else." The constant comparisons and lack of support took a toll on my mental health. I developed anxiety and struggled with self-esteem issues. There were days when I couldn't get out of bed, overwhelmed by the feeling that I'd never be good enough. I started having panic attacks before tests or performances, convinced that I was going to fail and disappoint everyone again. But whenever I tried to talk to my parents about how I was feeling, they dismiss it as teenage drama or tell me to toughen up. I remember one particularly bad day when I broke down crying at the dinner table. I tried to explain how I was feeling, the pressure, the anxiety, the constant feeling of inadequacy. My dad just looked uncomfortable and muttered something about hormones, while my mom suggested I try yoga or a new diet, as if that would magically fix everything. Now, as I'm about to start my second year of college, at a state university, not the community college they wanted, my parents have dropped a bombshell on me. They're planning to sell our house to fund Reggie's law school tuition and Katie's future college fund. The kicker? They expect me to drop out and get a job to contribute to the family finances. When they told me this, we were sitting in our living room. The same living room where Reggie's trophies and Katie's pageant crowns sit proudly on display, while my art competition certificates are shoved in a drawer somewhere. My mom was going on about how exciting it was that Reggie got into such a prestigious law school, and how Katie was showing so much promise in her advanced placement classes. Then, almost as an afterthought, they dropped their expectation on me. "Maya," my dad said, in that tone he uses when he's trying to sound reasonable, "we've been thinking about your future. College doesn't seem to be working out for you, and we need to be practical. We think it's best if you take a break from school and start working full-time. You can contribute to the household expenses and save up for your own education later if you still want to pursue it." I sat there, stunned. It was like they had planned out everyone's future but mine. Like my dreams and aspirations didn't matter at all. When I tried to protest, to explain that I was doing well in my classes and had plans for my future, they brushed it off. My mom even had the audacity to say, "Honey, we're just being realistic. Not everyone is cut out for higher education. There's no shame in honest work." I'm torn between my desire to stand up for myself and the fear of losing my family completely. Part of me wants to tell them off and walk away, to finally stand up for myself and my right to have a future of my own choosing. But another part is scared of being alone. I've never really had the chance to build a support system outside my family because I was always trying so hard to please them. I don't know what to do. Should I give in to their demands and sacrifice my education? Should I stand my ground and risk being cut off? How do I start prioritizing my own happiness and future when I've spent my whole life trying to meet impossible expectations? I feel like I'm standing at a crossroads, and whatever decision I make will shape the rest of my life. On one hand, the thought of dropping out of college and giving up on my dreams makes me feel physically ill. I've worked so hard to get where I am, and I finally feel like I'm finding my path. But on the other hand, the idea of being completely on my own, with no family support, is terrifying. I keep thinking about all the little moments over the years, the missed performances, the forgotten achievements, the constant comparisons, and I wonder if this is just the final straw. Maybe this is the push I need to finally break free and live life on my own terms. But then I remember family dinners, holiday gatherings, and those rare moments when everything felt okay, and I wonder if I'm overreacting. Am I throwing away my family over hurt feelings? I guess what I'm really asking is, how do you know when it's time to put yourself first? How do you find the strength to stand up for yourself when you've spent your whole life trying to please others? Any advice would be appreciated because right now, I feel lost and alone, caught between the family I've always known and the person I want to become. Update 1. It's been a month since my last post, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments and advice. Your words gave me the courage to stand up for myself, even though it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The day after I posted, I decided to confront my parents about their expectation for me to drop out of college. I spent hours preparing what I wanted to say, writing and rewriting my thoughts until I felt I could express myself clearly without letting emotions take over. I even practiced in front of the mirror, trying to project a confidence I didn't really feel. That evening, I took a deep breath and called a family meeting. We gathered in the living room, the same room where so many of my disappointments had played out over the years. My parents looked confused, Reggie seemed bored, and Katie was glued to her phone as usual. I stood in front of them, my hands shaking slightly, and started to speak. I told them how their favoritism had affected me over the years. I brought up specific incidents, the missed performances, the forgotten achievements, the constant comparisons. I explained how their lack of support had impacted my self-esteem and mental health. Finally, I told them how unfair and hurtful it was to expect me to sacrifice my education while supporting my siblings' futures. To say it didn't go well would be an understatement. My mom burst into tears almost immediately, accusing me of being ungrateful and selfish. "After everything we've done for you," she sobbed, "how can you say such horrible things?" My dad's face turned red with anger. He yelled about how I was tearing the family apart with my ridiculous accusations and that I was just jealous of my siblings' success. Reggie sat there in uncomfortable silence, looking anywhere but at me. I caught his eye for a moment, silently pleading for support, but he quickly looked away. Katie, on the other hand, seemed to come alive with indignation. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her and shouting about how I was ruining everything. The argument escalated quickly. My parents brought up every perceived failure and disappointment I'd ever caused them. They talked about how I'd never lived up to my potential, how I'd always been difficult and oversensitive. They said I was jealous of my siblings' success and that I should be thankful they even allowed me to go to college in the first place. When I tried to explain how their behavior had hurt me, they dismissed it as oversensitivity. My dad even said, "If you spend half as much time trying to improve yourself as you do feeling sorry for yourself, maybe you'd have something to show for it." That comment stung more than I wanted to admit. The breaking point came when my mom, tears streaming down her face, said, "If you can't appreciate the sacrifices we've made for you, maybe you shouldn't be part of this family anymore." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd always feared that their love was conditional, but hearing it stated so bluntly was devastating. I realized at that moment that nothing I could say would make them understand or change. So, I made a decision that terrified me but also felt incredibly liberating. I told them I would not be dropping out of college, and if that meant I was no longer welcome in the family, then so be it. The look of shock on their faces was almost comical. They clearly hadn't expected me to stand up to them. For a moment, there was complete silence in the room. Then my dad started yelling again, telling me to go to my room and think about what I'd done. But I didn't go to my room. Instead, I went to the garage and got out my old suitcase, the one we used for family vacations when I was little. I started packing right then and there, grabbing essential clothes and personal items. My parents followed me, alternating between angry demands and tearful pleas, but I tuned them out. It was like a switch had flipped inside me, and I was operating on autopilot. I spent the next few days in a daze, alternating between panic and a strange sense of relief. I couch-surfed at a friend's house while I figured out my next steps. I reached out to my academic advisor at university and explained my situation. She was incredibly supportive and helped me apply for additional financial aid and on-campus housing. It was a crash course in adulting. Suddenly I had to think about things like budgets, meal plans, and health insurance. I also contacted my Aunt Sarah, my mom's sister, who I've always been close to despite living in a different state. Aunt Sarah was the black sheep of the family. She'd chosen to be an artist rather than pursuing a respectable career, which had always made her a bit of an outsider. When I told her what happened, she was furious with my parents. She offered to help me out financially until I could get on my feet and even said I could come live with her during breaks if I needed to. Hearing her support meant more to me than I could express. The next week was a whirlwind of activity. I packed up the rest of my belongings, said goodbye to the few friends I had in my hometown, and prepared to leave. My parents barely spoke to me during this time, treating me like a stranger in my own home. The silence was almost worse than the yelling. Reggie tried to mediate, suggesting family therapy, but I knew it was too late for that. He seemed genuinely confused by the whole situation, as if he'd never noticed the disparities in how we were treated. Part of me was angry at him for his obliviousness, but another part understood that it's hard to see privilege when you're the one benefiting from it. Katie, surprisingly, hugged me before I left and whispered, "I'm sorry." It was the first time I felt any real connection with her. For a moment, I saw past the perfect princess facade to the scared kid underneath, and I felt a pang of regret for leaving her behind. But I knew I had to do this for myself. As I write this update, I'm sitting in my new dorm room. It's small and a bit cramped, with cinderblock walls and a roommate I'm still getting to know. But despite the cramped quarters and institutional feel, it feels like freedom. I can decorate how I want, study what interests me, and make decisions without constant criticism or comparison. I'm scared about the future, how I'll manage financially, how I'll cope with being essentially cut off from my family. There are moments when the enormity of what I've done hits me, and I feel overwhelmed. Yesterday, I had a minor breakdown in the communal bathroom, crying in a shower stall because I couldn't figure out how to do laundry properly. It's the little things that catch me off guard sometimes. But I'm also excited about the possibility of building a life on my own terms. I've already joined a support group for students from difficult family backgrounds, and it's comforting to know I'm not alone in my struggles. I'm looking into part-time job opportunities on campus, the library is hiring, and I've always loved being around books. My classes start next week, and for the first time, I'm genuinely excited about my studies. I've signed up for an Intro to Psychology course that sounds fascinating, and an art history elective that I would never have dared to take if I was still under my parents' thumb. It's going to be hard, I know that. There will be days when I question my decision, when I miss the comfort and familiarity of home despite all its problems. But for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm in control of my own story. To everyone who encouraged me to stand up for myself, thank you. Your support gave me the strength to take this leap. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I made the right decision for myself. I'll keep you updated on how things go. Update 2. It's been 6 months since my last update, and life has certainly taken some unexpected turns. I want to thank everyone again for their continued support and kind messages. They've been a lifeline during some pretty tough times. Adjusting to my new independent life hasn't been easy, but it's been incredibly rewarding. I've had to learn how to budget, cook for myself, and balance work and studies. The first month was particularly challenging. I burned more meals than I cared to admit and had a minor meltdown in the grocery store trying to figure out the most cost-effective way to buy toilet paper. But slowly, I'm getting the hang of it. I picked up a part-time job at the campus library, which helps with expenses and has the added bonus of quiet study time during slow shifts. My coworkers have become a sort of surrogate family. We have potluck dinners once a month, and they've been incredibly patient in teaching me adult skills like how to write a check or use a real coffee maker. My Aunt Sarah has been amazing throughout this whole process. She checks in on me regularly and even surprised me with a care package full of home-cooked meals and necessities last month. It included some of her homemade apple pie, a family recipe that always reminds me of happier times during childhood holidays. It made me cry, but in a good way. Now, for the unexpected part. About 2 months ago, I received a message from Reggie. He wanted to meet up and talk. I was hesitant at first, memories of his silence during our family confrontation still fresh in my mind. But curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to meet him for coffee at a neutral location, a little cafe halfway between my campus and his law school. When I saw Reggie, I was struck by how different he looked. Gone was the perfectly groomed golden boy. He seemed tired, his hair a bit messy, his clothes wrinkled. To my surprise, Reggie apologized. He admitted that he had always known about the favoritism but had been too selfish and comfortable in his position to say anything. Seeing me stand up to our parents had made him realize how wrong the whole situation was. As we talked, Reggie opened up about the pressure he'd been under his whole life. How he'd never really wanted to be a lawyer, but felt trapped by our parents' expectations. He told me he was proud of me for having the courage to break away, something he wished he'd done years ago. But here's where it gets really interesting. Reggie revealed that he had decided not to go to law school. Apparently, it had never been his dream, just our parents' expectation. He had been too afraid to disappoint them, but my actions had inspired him to pursue his real passion, teaching. He's now enrolled in an education program and seems genuinely happy for the first time in years. We talked for hours that day, really connecting as siblings for perhaps the first time in our lives. It was strange and wonderful to see my brother as a real person, with fears and dreams of his own, rather than the perfect ideal I'd always measured myself against. As for Katie, Reggie told me she's been asking about me a lot. She's starting to see our parents' behavior for what it is and is struggling with her own identity separate from their expectations. I've since had a few video calls with her, and while our relationship is still a bit awkward, we're slowly building a connection. It's strange to realize that in many ways, she's going through the same struggles I did, just a few years later. My parents, on the other hand, remain stubborn in their stance. They try to guilt me into coming back home through messages from extended family members, but I've stood my ground. It hurts, but I'm learning to accept that I may never have the relationship with them that I always hoped for. There are days when this realization hits me hard, and I allow myself to grieve for the family I wish we could have been. On a positive note, I've discovered a passion for psychology through one of my elective courses. The professor, Dr. Martinez, has become something of a mentor to me. She's encouraged me to share my experiences in class discussions, helping me see how my personal struggles connect to broader psychological concepts. I'm considering changing my major, as I've realized I want to help other people who have gone through similar family struggles. It feels like I finally found a purpose that's truly my own. There have been tough days where I question my decisions, where I miss the comfort of home despite all its problems. Sometimes I find myself staring at old family photos, wondering if I made the right choice. But then I remember how it felt to live under constant criticism and comparison, and I know I've made the right choice. I'm nervous but excited about what the future holds. For the first time in my life, I'm defining success on my own terms, and it feels incredible. There's still a long road ahead, but I'm ready to face it, one day at a time. Update 3. It's hard to believe it's been a year since my original post. So much has changed, and I wanted to share one final update with all of you who have supported me through this journey. I'm happy to report that I'm thriving in my new life. I've officially changed my major to psychology with a minor in social work. My grades have improved significantly now that I'm studying something I'm passionate about, and I've even made the dean's list last semester. It's amazing how much easier it is to focus and excel when you're not constantly worried about measuring up to impossible standards. My relationship with Reggie has grown stronger. We meet up regularly for coffee or study sessions, and it's like getting to know my brother for the first time. He's much more relaxed and genuine now that he's pursuing his own path. He'll be starting his student teaching next semester, and I couldn't be prouder of him. Watching him work with kids during his practicum, I can see how much this career suits him. It's like he's finally found his place in the world. Katie and I have also been rebuilding our relationship. She's applying to colleges now and has confided in me about her struggles with our parents' expectations. I've been able to offer her advice and support, which has brought us closer. It's bittersweet to see her going through some of the same struggles I did, but I'm glad I can be there for her in a way no one was for me. Last week, she called me in tears because she'd gotten a B on a test and was terrified of our parents' reaction. It was a stark reminder of the environment I left behind. As for my parents, there's been a small development. My mom reached out to me last month. The conversation was awkward and tense, but it was a start. She didn't apologize, but she did ask about my studies and seemed genuinely interested in my life. We're far from reconciliation, but it's a tiny step in the right direction. I'm trying to approach this with cautious optimism, remembering the advice my therapist gave me about setting boundaries and managing expectations. The biggest news, however, is something I never expected. Remember the support group I joined for students from difficult family backgrounds? Well, I've become quite involved in it over the past year. Recently, I was approached by the university's counseling center. They want me to help develop a peer support program for students struggling with family issues. It's a paid position that will look great on my resume and aligns perfectly with my career goals. This opportunity feels like validation of everything I've been through. The pain and struggles I experienced are being transformed into something positive that can help others. It's incredibly healing. I've already started brainstorming ideas for the program, drawing from my own experiences and the stories I've heard from others in the support group. I won't pretend everything is perfect. I still have days where I struggle with self-doubt and the emotional scars from years of being the less favored child. But I'm in therapy now, working through these issues, and I'm proud of the progress I've made. I'm learning to recognize my own worth, independent of anyone else's validation. To anyone out there who might be in a similar situation to where I was a year ago, I want you to know that it gets better. Standing up for yourself is scary, but it's worth it. You are worthy of love, respect, and the chance to pursue your own dreams. It won't be easy, and there will be days when you question everything, but keep pushing forward. You're stronger than you know. Thank you all again for your support throughout this journey. Your kindness and encouragement have meant more to me than you could ever know. Here's to the future and all the possibilities it holds.